And David, we want to thank you for allowing me to be a part of this and including me on the conference staff. And it is a joy to work with David. As he said earlier, we have been friends for a very long time, and it's good to be able to share this and now to talk with you about the parsonage standards. Back in 2017, the Mississippi Annual Conference adopted the parsonage standards. Several years ago, there was a set of parsonage standards that were developed, and over the number of years some things have changed, and as they've changed we've had to update those, and in 2017 the annual conference approved the new conference standards. So they actually began to take place in 2019, and the plan was actually put together, and if you look it up it actually says 2018 Mississippi Conference Parsonage Standards. These parsonage standards give a parsonage overview. It gives a little information about the general requirements that ought to be in the parsonage, the size of rooms, the things that need to be in the parsonage, the equipment, the maintenance. All of those things are part of the parsonage standards that we have developed. So if you are a church that owns a parsonage and are looking to see what all needs to be in there, there's a place in our conference website to go and to look that up and to see all the recommendations for the size of the parsonage and what the task force developed and the annual conference approved several years ago. It describes basically that where the annual conference came down to is that the church is responsible for the parsonage. The trustees are responsible for looking after it and taking care of it. But their major responsibility is to look after the appliances and those furnishings that are there. In that process, a part of what took place is we began to look at this, and we discovered that pastors and clergy's families were wanting to have particularly things like their own household furniture, their bedroom furniture, different things like that. And so as we began to look at that, we put together a standard of what that would be. So if you look at what you would have before you would have first a Mississippi Conference Clergy Parsonage Agreement. And that's basically a form that the pastor and the chair of the trustees and the chair of the PPR or the SPRC would fill out. And it basically says who's going to be responsible for what in the parsonage, and that the pastor or the clergy are going to be looking after and responsible for certain parts of the parsonage. There's also what was approved as a parsonage conditional use agreement. This agreement was established a few years ago and approved by the annual conference, that if there were certain things that took place in the parsonage, say the clergy's spouse were teaching piano lessons in the home, or there were some other things taking place that might be considered a business, there's an approval form that we have to get for that to be taken care of and that to take place. So there's some certain things that have to be filled out, and you can look that up. It's called the Parsonage Conditional Use Agreement, and basically it just talks about that what the pastor is going to be using the parsonage for. The parsonage is a very sacred place in the life of our clergy, and it is their home just as your home is your home. And it needs to be respected and honored in that way. But David mentioned it a little bit earlier in his report to the trustees, that the parsonage is one of those things that needs to be looked after and cared for. A lot of times we don't realize what all is in that parsonage, but there is a request or requirement from the trustees to actually do an annual review of the parsonage. So there is a certain form that we ask you to fill out and to go through every year, and that a member of the trustees and a member of the staff parish or pastor parish relations committee would go in with the pastor. Now let me explain something real quickly, and we always share this in our trustee training. That home belongs to the clergy as long as they are living in it. And that means that no one in the church or trustees or anyone should enter that home without the pastor's knowledge or without the clergy knowing exactly that they are coming in that home. And so if you're going to have a review, you need to do that with the clergy being present and let them walk you through what all is in the house, maybe some things that need to be repaired, some things that need to be fixed. And as they look at that, you can go over all the things that are there, and there's a place to list the things that you looked at in the inspection and that the trustees can look for. Now, some years churches haven't budgeted for that, but what we recommend is that you begin to budget each year a certain amount of money in there to help take care of any repairs that might need to take place in the parsonage. One of the other things that we authorize and approve was something that we feel is very important, and that is that the Mississippi Conference now has a local church parsonage 10-year inspection. And so every 10 years, there's an important piece that we've placed for you to go over. And we actually recommend that you bring in maybe some professional folks like electricians. You may bring in a construction person to look at the parsonage to see that all the things that make up that parsonage are really cared for. One of the things that happens in parsonage sometimes is that we don't think about the awnings or the gutters, things that are located around the parsonage that need to be looked after. Sometimes we don't think about the window sills. And one of the other things that we sometimes forget to look at is are the electrical outlets. Are they correctly placed or taken care of? Are the correct junction boxes where they need to be? And so what we recommended is every 10 years, and the annual conference did approve this, that in the years that end in 2018, 2028, 2038, you do a 10-year inspection of the parsonage. You look at all the windows, you look at the garage doors, you look at all the washing machines and dryers, the refrigerators. I served in a church years ago that the refrigerator that was in the parsonage was there when they built the parsonage. It was the original refrigerator, and it was an efficiency apartment size refrigerator. And families had grown since that point in time. And so one of the things that we discovered in looking at this is that we've discovered that the more you can look at things like appliances, how many of us have washing machines and dryers in our parsonages? And that washer or dryer may be 15, 20 years old. It still works, preacher. Yeah, it still works. But you think about it, it might need to be updated. And if you do this every 10 years, there are ways that we can, and you can begin to prepare for those updates that might need to be made in your parsonage. Because when you look at the parsonage standards and you really review that in the parsonage standards, one of the things that you're going to discover is the size of the rooms, the numbers of bathrooms, garage or no garage, 2 cars, who's responsible for the different things like mowing the yard, cutting the grass, trimming the hedge. How is all of that taken care of? So when you do this 10-year inspection, there are a lot of different things that you look at, not only in the parsonage, but the outlying properties. Is there a storage building? Is there a place that the pastor can park a lawnmower or whatever it might, other equipment that they might need? But some of these things need to be looked at real closely, and there are some things that we need to look at in relation to health care and making sure that the air systems and everything that is in that is properly done. Now, one of the things that takes place in the United Methodist Church, and that we're all aware of, is that our pastors move on a regular basis. We're up for appointment annually, and each year we can have a new pastor moving in. So one of the things that we have done is we have developed what is called a move-in form for the pastor or the clergy. And this is basically a small form that basically just gives some basic information that the chair of the pastor parish or staff parish relations committee and a member of the trustees would go over with the incoming pastor. They would look at everything in the house that needs to be updated or taken care of. Is there something that they might specifically need? What are the general appearances? What's the driveway look like? Does shrubbery need taken care of? The lawn, who's going to do those things? Giving information about, when one of my questions comes up is what day do they pick up the trash? Well, if you can have this on the move-in form for your pastor, it's very helpful. And so as you look at the overall condition of the parsonage, things in the kitchen, there may be some things that each family might need. Because one of the things that we also have discovered is that in the new parsonage standard forms, every parsonage is requested to have a microwave oven. I live in a parsonage that is only about 12 years old, and they don't actually have a microwave in their parsonage. So that's one of the things that they need to look to include in their parsonage as part of the thing. Now, we have the move-in form for the pastor, but there's also a parsonage checklist. When was the last time your trustees or your chair of your PPR or maybe even a member of the staff parish committee went in and actually identified everything that was in the parsonage, everything that belongs to the parsonage? What end tables, what rugs, what curtains, what furniture, what appliances. There are many things that we need to look at and to inspect. And so we actually have what's called a parsonage checklist. And that parsonage checklist gives us an opportunity to look at the floors, to look at the carpet, everything that's there to see what are the things that need to be maybe upgraded. There does come natural wear and tear on things that are in the parsonage, and so we want to invite you to look real closely at this parsonage checklist, go over it, and see all the things that are there. So when you're looking at that, there are places for the pastor to fill in the move form, to look at one of the other things that happens is there's also a form that's available to you on the website. It's called checking when the pastor is vacating the parsonage. So when that pastor goes to leave, before they leave, a member of the trustees, a member of the PPR committee needs to go through the parsonage with them, make sure everything is in there that needs to be in there, and before they leave, take care of any incidental problems that the pastor's family may have created or caused in that parsonage, and allow the trustees to get it repaired and fixed before the incoming pastor comes. So we want to encourage you to look at this. It's a very exciting time to own a parsonage. We did this survey about with the Parsonage Task Force probably, I guess, about 7 years ago. And we really went over everything that was possible there, and we looked at it. And in looking at those things, we discovered there are a lot of things that bypass us. We forget to look at, we don't think about. But yet, David mentioned it earlier in one of his remarks. If you wouldn't live in it, why would you want your pastor to live in it? And so one of the things that I love to tell in our person-to-person meetings is, if you don't want it in your home, please don't put it in the pastor's home. Because that old furniture and that old bed or that old sofa that was good at one time for you in your house, it ought to be good enough for the preacher. Well, if it's worn out for you, it's worn out for him or her also. But we encourage you to look at that. Look closely at the parsonage standards that are there. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me at mhedgepeth@mississippi-umc.org.